How did I go from military officer to financially independent? This is the story of my financial life. I'm going to talk about what I did with money from the time that I joined the military up until present day, how I achieved financial independence at a relatively young age for a family that had one income the whole time, military salary. This is the Rich on Money podcast, episode 18. And as I've done many times on other podcasts, I am basically telling my financial story. I did some strange things with the debt-free real estate that you might be interested in. So I joined the Air Force in 2000. Not really sure what's going to happen with my life financially. And I started off in Oklahoma. Of course, I rented there. Actually rented a trailer. Was actually in pilot training at the time. Actually became a federal agent and I moved to Guam as my first assignment. When I was in Guam, I rented a place that was oceanfront, totally awesome, $2,100 a month, lived large, had a kayak, loved it. I was 10 feet from the water, floor to ceiling windows. Felt like I wanted to buy real estate, but knew that buying it in Guam wasn't the right place. It's kind of expensive. It's an island. It's kind of oceanfront. It just didn't seem like a good idea. They had lots of typhoons and lots of earthquakes. I went through 2 Category 5 typhoons. One completely destroyed my apartment and everything in it. Next assignment, Washington, D.C. I finally go buy a property, right? $280,000 for a townhouse right outside of D.C. And I remember the market seemed hot at the time. I thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life by buying a townhouse, paying so much money, $280,000. It seemed absurdly high, and prices had jumped a lot in the last few years. I want to say the person I bought it from bought it for $180, maybe 3 years earlier. Bought it, and maybe a few years later, I'd realized that the prices had went up a lot, and I tried to buy something else. I was trying to find some other investment while I was there in DC. I think I was only in DC for 2 years, but I wanted to buy more real estate. But everything was shooting up so fast. I ended up buying new construction, and I was trying to flip new construction. What time frame are we in here? Well, we're like 2003 to 2005. So this is like 2005. I'm trying to flip new construction. The housing market was so hot that a lot of people were building new construction, signing a contract, putting down $5,000. You lock in a price, you lock in a lot, and you build your house. By the time that house is built, a year or a year and a half later, it's appreciated $30,000, $50,000, $70,000. Don't move into it, turn around and sell it to somebody else, flipping new construction. I saw everybody else doing it. It was my turn to make some money, and it didn't really work. By the time the house was built, 2005, I think, kind of noticed the price hadn't went up. So I'm like, crap, I guess I'll sell this place or maybe I'll rent it out, put it up for sale, put it up for rent. All I got was Section 8 interest at the price that I needed to cover my mortgage, which would have been a horrible idea. Had trouble selling it. And it was like the 6th house, right? 6th townhouse in a large development of several hundred townhouses. And it had all the bells and whistles. It wasn't going to sell, right? It wasn't going to sell for a price where I was going to make money. I got nervous and I said, maybe they just get out of this thing. I remember offering to my real estate agent, I'm a real estate agent now, a bonus. I think it's like $5,000 bonus. Just sell this thing and a $5,000 bonus. I think it was for the buyer's agent. The house sold. I made $10,000. I was pissed as hell because I expected to make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. But what happened next was interesting. All the houses in that neighborhood, as they were finished, went up for sale, didn't sell. Everything got depressed. The market was collapsing. I just didn't know it yet. It took years for that area to recover. I moved to Monterey, California to go to language school and to go to Naval Postgraduate School. And I still wanted to invest. I wanted to keep buying real estate. By this time, my original townhouse for $280,000 is a rental property. It probably rented out for $2,000 a month, which if you understand the 1% rule that I love to talk about, a house should rent for 1% of the purchase price, $280,000. It should rent for at least $2,800 a month. Didn't. That kind of thing is fairly common in high cost of living areas. They aren't great investments. I didn't know that at the time. It seemed fine to me. I wanted an investment. I almost bought a property in Monterey, California with a view of the ocean. It was kind of like way high up and it had a real small view. A view of the ocean, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, $950,000. And that real estate agent told me, look, if you buy this, it's just going to keep going up. Everybody's making money. I was nervous, right? Of course, I just had this weird hiccup with the property that I'd bought in as a flip, right? This new construction. I didn't know that was the market dying. I just thought maybe I picked a bad area, but I didn't buy. I rented. I rented a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment in Monterey, California. I rented it for $1,300 a month, but the military was giving me $2,300 a month. I was pocketing $1,000 a month. Well, I was there from 2005 to 2008. The market pretty much crashed while I was there, the real estate market. There were a lot of people that bought properties there. I remember there was a place called Salinas outside of Monterey. People had the values dropped to almost half. This is military members, had the values dropped to almost half what they paid for it in the time that they were there at that assignment. Some of them just walked away, right? And let the bank foreclose on their house, but it wasn't a great time. And luckily, this crash did not seem to affect my ability to rent my property out in DC. That was good. It was renting for $2,000 a month. I think over the years, it might have went up a little bit. Let's fast forward. Fast forward a few more years after I went to Naval Postgraduate School, language school for Japanese, moved to Japan. I had a partner in that neighborhood in Alexandria, Virginia, where my first property was. I'd been looking for more properties to buy in that area every time I went home to visit him. And he's kind of like, Rich, why don't we flip a couple properties together? I probably flipped 8 properties over the course of 2 years in the same neighborhood where I had my first property. Essentially, I was raising the values of properties in my own neighborhood. And it was a good time to flip because of the depressed prices right after 2008. There were just lots of distressed properties coming in the market, and we were taking them, making them the nicest house in the neighborhood and selling. I made good money flipping. I made good money on 6 flips, lost money on 2 flips. And by the way, I did this all without even living there. I was in Japan when this all happened, had a partner on the ground. I financed the properties. He did all the work. We split the profits in half. He was an honest guy, luckily. Didn't like this. I stopped doing it. Next assignment, Montgomery, Alabama. That's where I am now. I was selected to go to Air Command and Staff College, which basically means you're going to war college. And I was only going to be here for 10 months. I was not happy about moving to Montgomery, Alabama. I feel like this is the best part of my story. I love telling this story because of what it's meant to me in my sort of financial life. But I went into class, right? I was going to be sort of like a leader for part of the Air War College. So we came early and we were in these classes, and it was on the first day of class, and all the leaders were getting to know each other, the people that were going to be in charge of their groups. We were introducing ourselves to the class, and the very first person, his name was Brother. That was like his military call sign. He introduced himself and he said something that I'll never forget. My name's Brother. I've been here for a couple of years. This is like my second assignment here in Montgomery. By the way, I've been buying real estate here and it's just going crazy. At this point, I'm going to be able to retire soon. Nice to meet you all. And nobody paid any attention to what he said. And I was like, what did that guy say? What did he say about real estate? I didn't hear anybody else introduce themselves for the next 30 minutes. We went on break. I think I leaped over a desk, ran over to him, and I said, what are you doing with real estate? I had a rental property and I'd been trying to do other things. I'd tried to flip new construction. So I peppered him with questions. Well, how much are you buying them for? Like, what about property management? What are you going to do when you move away? How much do they cost, right? Like, what are the tenants like? He had answers for everything. And then I simply said, can you help me do this? And he did. And I bought 6 properties over the next 10 months. And the weird thing was I bought it in cash. Now, I guess I got to back up a little to explain how and why I did this. How and why did I buy it in cash? Well, I've always been a frugal person and I've been a savvy investor. I've always been sort of anti-debt. I've been investing money, right, pretty well since the year 2000. I've been putting money away in my Roth IRA, been putting money into the military version of a TSP, and been putting money into savings. I was actually investing and just putting money into a brokerage account that wasn't in a retirement account. At the same time, I was kind of a Dave Ramsey fan. At the time, and I had this idea of like, well, it's cool to pay off your primary residence. I'd paid off that $280,000 primary residence. It was paid off by the time I was flipping property. The first 6 properties I bought, I just had the cash for. But the first house was only $30,000. The second house was only $45,000. And the prices just kind of crept up after that. Eventually, we always kept it under 50 for the first 6 houses. And then I moved away. And then I had a property management company managing it for me. And I went to Europe. I went to Germany. I remember thinking I should have bought a lot more, but I also thought to myself, what if this doesn't work? What if my 6 rental properties get trashed by my tenants? What if the market drops? What if the military base moves out of Montgomery, Alabama? I had all these what ifs. So I kind of waited, and I wanted to wait and see that this investment was going to go well. It did go well. I didn't have problems with my tenants. The prices of houses were appreciating. Not fast like a lot of cities, but it was just appreciating. And I'm like, damn it, I should have bought 20, but let's keep buying. So I kept buying. And I'd say over the course of 2 years, I went from buying house number 7, and I did it remotely from overseas, house number 7 in Montgomery, Alabama, to house number 20, all in cash. I believe around the time that I got to house 10, I ran out of cash. And I was paying more at this point, paying around $50,000. I sold my property in Washington, D.C., took that money, bought 6 more properties, and also bought 4 properties in IRAs, which I don't recommend, but I did it and it was interesting. That's a different podcast episode. Remind me to do it. So here I am at, here I am at like the 3/4 point of my career. I really don't have any debt to my name, not even a car loan. I don't have any credit card debt. And I've got 20 paid off properties that are just bringing in rental income. And I could tell you that makes for some high taxes, when it's all pure income, right? It's pure rent. So you're getting taxed on it as taxable income. And I don't get to deduct any mortgage interest, right? Because I don't have mortgages. Maybe you consider that a bad thing. I consider that a good thing. Now, there's always going to be this debate, right, for the rest of my life. Would I have been better off financing these properties and owning a lot more, or having these like paid off rental properties? Maybe when it comes to pure numbers, I would have been better off financing them. But I liked having paid off properties. I liked the way it felt. And I'll give you a quick example. When we went through COVID, there was this time frame where it looked like there was sort of this revolt going on among tenants where they were going to stop paying rent. And it's kind of like, hey, what can you do about it? There's a moratorium on evicting people. And I kind of thought, oh my God, what if I don't get paid? Like, what if all my tenants collectively decide to stop paying me? What will that do to me? What will that do to my life? Because at this point, I just retired from the military, and that was my primary source of income. I mean, outside of having a military retirement. At the time, I'd also just purchased a 6-plex and just purchased a 4-plex with loans. So am I scared? Was I scared? Actually, I wasn't scared at all. Why? Because of my financial situation. If people had stopped paying me for even several months, I'm not at risk of losing these properties because I don't have mortgages on almost all of them. I've got money in the bank and I've got a military retirement coming in. I wasn't scared. Now, if I had 50 or 100 highly leveraged properties, that would have scared the crap out of me. COVID ended up not being a situation where people with rental properties were in trouble, but it sure felt that way for a few months. But obviously markets took off again. I'm talking about real estate and stocks, and things just kept climbing. So I'll go back and talk about a few things. Why debt-free? How was I in the position to do this, right? I want to talk about Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. And he has this book where there's like 10 baby steps for getting out of debt. I was never really in debt because I read that book so early in my life. I just never went into debt. But if you are in debt, you read the book and there's like a nice little system for getting out of debt. One of the things it said was you should never have a loan on real estate, not even on rental properties. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I still liked the idea. I loved the feeling of having a paid off primary residence. That was the coolest feeling ever when I actually had it paid off. And I always loved the feeling of having those 20 paid off properties. And it's kind of a cool little soundbite. Honestly, it got me on a ton of podcasts. It got my story out there. It gave me a lot of opportunities just to have this interesting story of the military guy with 20 paid off rental properties. But I will say there is nothing wrong with having a 30-year fixed loan at a good interest rate for your primary residence, and then doing that with your rental properties, making sure that they cash flow and that they're in good areas and there's appreciation going on and that you're able to do that again. But I love my paid off properties and I'm still not in a lot of debt and I just enjoy that. So what are some of the things I did early on to put myself in this good position? I always maxed out retirement accounts. I didn't start on the 401k as early as I should have, but I think at least 5 or 6 years into my career, I started doing that. By the way, one of the biggest mistakes in my life was not figuring out how to do it from day one. But I put the max into IRAs for myself. I put max into TSP, which is basically a 401k for the military. And I was putting money in investment accounts and I was saving. I didn't take expensive trips. I didn't have expensive furniture. I didn't go out to eat very much. If I went out to eat, I didn't do appetizers. I didn't do dessert. I didn't do drinks. Right? I didn't have anything like name brand. I wasn't keeping up with everybody else. I was kind of happier looking at a bank account. I was happier looking at my savings. I was happier projecting how things were going to look when I retire, which is where I am now. And that all paid off. I mean, as I got more wealthy, obviously I stopped being so frugal. I don't want to tell you how much money I spend at Starbucks every day now, but back then I didn't drink coffee, but I would have made it in a Dixie cup at home. I would, and, pack a lunch and go to work and all that kind of stuff. But as my income increased and I had paid off rental properties, it's like, well, I mean, I don't have to be so frugal anymore. And that I sort of let up on that. But in many ways, I'm still frugal. The skills that get you to where you're at, sometimes you just never shake. And that's not a bad thing. I know there's like Sam Walton from Walmart, or like Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, like living in some house that's worth like less than 400,000 or something. They've got the money, but they just don't like flaunt it, right? That's kind of my style. I kind of like the length of my podcast episodes. People often had these like 45-minute, hour-long podcast episodes. I can't do that. I love talking, but while I'm recording this and I'm glancing at how long I've talked, 26 minutes right now, when I edit it, it'll definitely be on 20 minutes. I think I got some good nuggets in there. This is the story of my financial life. I'm Rich Carey from Rich on Money, and this is podcast episode 18, and I'm signing off.